everyone, welcome back to the channel, and as you can see today we're here in Planet Coaster, which has been a while, but you can see that we're opening up a blank map and starting a fresh project here. So I will explain a little bit about what we're doing. This is a project that I've sort of had in the back of my mind, just an idea or a concept really, for the last 2 or 3 years. And the idea behind this is to do a theme park based on different eras in time. So we're doing different lands from different eras, and the name Warped World sort of explains the warp between time zones. So I guess the tagline's going to be a journey through time. So we're going to try and get all that sort of on the entrance when we get to that stage. But the first thing that I'm working on here is a Roaring Twenties themed land. Now I wanted to get these buildings in first as the first thing I build in the park, just to see if I could make this theme work and if it's something that I'm enjoying building and something that I want to continue with, because I always think it's really difficult when you have this complete blank canvas. You have to start with nothing, just, you know, put your own ideas together, and it's always quite overwhelming. So I think the best thing to do is put some theming down, put some buildings down, and see if it looks good really. Obviously so far we've hardly got anything and it doesn't look good, but as soon as you start seeing me putting these pieces in, we start to build something up that looks a little bit more interesting and something that we can work with. So spoiler alert, I am going to continue the series. I've already started working on the second episode, so although we haven't played Planet Coaster much for a while, since I finished the last park at the end of last year, I have made quite good progress with this one so far, and I'm really motivated to play the game at the moment, which is good. I've actually played it for 2 nights in a row, which is sort of unheard of for me. I normally don't have that time, and I definitely normally don't have that sort of motivation, so it's really good to be able to do that. And yeah, I think that's it. Like, we all know this is a time consuming game. I'll probably say it in every video, everyone probably knows that already, but the more you play it, the easier it is to find ways to do things a little bit quicker and save yourself some time. I'm also being mindful of the piece count in this one, so as you can see, rather than building everything completely custom, I have just put together used a load of pre-made sort of wall archway door pieces. Cannot remember for the life of me which set these are from, but it's from one of the DLCs, and yeah, that's just going to save so much on piece count, because this is obviously a very large building. But you can see the windows there that I put in a custom, so I think things that are going to look better custom, we will do custom, but anytime we can use pre-made pieces to save on the piece count, we will. And the same goes for Theme Maker Toolkit. I don't want to get carried away and use loads where it's not necessary, because it will just slow the park down. You can see we already have one piece in, and that's the pavement piece. I wanted a different texture for the pavement, something that works well with this idea. So talking a little bit more about the theme then, I've always been really interested in the Roaring Twenties and the sort of fashion and stuff like that that comes with it, and I thought if we can sort of replicate that in some way here, well, not the fashion, but obviously like the architecture, and you know, sort of loosely theme it around that. Obviously at the moment we don't have any Art Deco really stuff in, we're just using more the colours and stuff that you see in the Roaring Twenties, and some of the sort of architectural styles I think work fine. But at some point this will be a small little town that the guests can walk around with some Art Deco architecture in there as well, because obviously that screams Roaring Twenties. We've got some of the classic vintage cars in as well, which I think really adds to it, but I'm going to have to really sort of think what I can do for custom scenery pieces and stuff that really sort of show what this theme is, because just maybe from the buildings alone it's not completely self-explanatory. I don't know really. But I'm happy with the way everything looks and the way everything turned out. As you can sort of see in the thumbnail, we have a couple of building facades, so we've made a good start to this area. Now, some of the inspiration for this build goes back to the sort of RCT2 days, and one of the expansion packs or DLCs, which not what they called it back then, did have some Roaring Twenties theming sets in it, and I remember all the pre-made campaign maps. I really didn't like the campaign maps that came with those expansions, or really the RCT2 game. RCT1 had much better campaigns or scenarios, or whatever you want to call them. But yeah, getting a little bit off topic there. The Roaring Twenties theming, I think, was one of the nicer sets, and although I never really built anything that great in it back then, I felt, yeah, we can definitely try and do something with this in Planet Coaster. This building then is going to be the sort of facade and entrance, and it's going to house a ride at some point. I haven't 100% decided on what yet, but I've got some ideas in my head that I'm not going to spoil just yet. So we do have to build somewhat of an interior. In this episode, you're not going to see very much interior going in, just enough to sort of make it not grass, if that makes sense. Just to cover the terrain, is probably a better way to put it. So you can see I'm putting some TMTK brick walls in there, just to cover up some of the space inside, because a lot of it will just be covered up so that we don't have to do everything. And then we'll sort of start building up a queue line for the ride that's going to be housed in this building. And that's all sort of planned out in my head now, and I've got a good sort of idea of how I'm going to do it. Placing in some floor pieces then in these open windows. I did want two of the windows to have a little bit of detailing in them, a little bit of like as if they're sort of shop fronts. I sort of imagined this building to be a department store, and this is in the centre of town. It's the sort of flagship building of the town that everyone flocks to do their shopping. So we're putting a couple of little shop fronts in there, nothing too crazy, just some books in one, and just some barrels and stuff in the other one. Not really sure what it would be selling there, beer keg shop or something. But yeah, at some point I want to build a jeweller's in this building, and I think that might become part of the ride that we go for, like a vintage jeweller's. That it could even become part of the queue or something like that. So I want to make sure that I've sort of left everything at the back open so that I can do whatever I want to do with it going forward. I also really want to be mindful of the path layouts for this park, because I think that was one of the problems with my last park. Well, not problems per se, but one of the things that I wasn't so happy with, because the layout just didn't flow that nicely, and that's something I really want to work on in this one. So I think eventually people will be able to walk around this building, but I'm not too sure on how that's going to work yet. Later in the episode you will see me put in a couple more buildings to the left that sort of complement this one, but smaller shops and, you know, smaller sort of outlet retailers like that, but all trying to stick with this Roaring Twenties sort of vintage theme as well. So we use quite a lot of Victorian pieces and stuff like that, which I think work fine. There you can see me do a little bit of sort of very, very minor interior shop front work. Again, nothing too crazy. Trying to be really careful at the moment with the piece count, because it's easy when you start off a project to get carried away with it, because it's running nicely, you're getting a good frame rate and you think it's just going to last forever, but really it's the honeymoon period of the good frame rate. So yeah, you can see what I'm on about there with the barrels and just putting some pots, and we've got a little lantern in there and stuff like that as well. All pretty simple. And then we're going to work a bit on the roof, and I think once you see what we do with the roof for this building, you'll really see how the theme starts to come together and it starts looking a lot nicer. Using very standard fencing pieces but recolorable ones to outline the sort of trim, I guess, of the top of the building. And if I guess they'd serve a purpose if this was real as well, because if anyone was up there working, then it would protect them from falling to their death. And with that in mind as well, we're putting some sort of Juliet balcony type things onto the front of the windows. I mean, I don't think these are balcony doors, I think they're just floor to ceiling windows, but still I think that looks quite nice and adds a bit more detailing to pieces that I haven't really done that much with myself. I've just plunked them down. But yeah, I think this building works really well because using very few pieces, I've managed to get a good amount of detailing. And yeah, I think it's come together pretty well. The roof here was quite difficult. I had to do it in several different buildings, if that makes sense, different groups or whatever they call it in the game, just because of the different what am I trying to say, the different sort of angles, I guess, of the roof pieces, the different pitches and whatnot. Well, they're all the same pitch, but yeah, they're different angles. And then, like everything in this game, any bits that didn't look quite right, we could just cover up and make it into a sort of feature. And I think the feature that goes on at the front of this roof with the clock face is probably what gives the building its character and what really makes it pop. That's probably my favourite part of this build, actually, which you'll see going in a minute. First, I'm sort of experimenting with a bit of this. We do end up keeping these roof trims because they work quite nicely here, but I do go and put that sort of small clock tower piece in front of this, so you don't see it as much from the front. But those trims actually I think work quite well with the roof style and sort of blend in with the rest of the building quite well as well. And then just having to play about with different pieces, and thought rotating this would look quite good, so we've rotated it sort of many times, and again wasted a bit of piece count on there, but I think it's worth it because of the texture that it gives, just to go around this clock, and the clock just sits in there perfectly, actually. I just then had to think of a way of putting it together, so we just stick a couple of pillars in, and yeah, I think that looks nice enough like that. Obviously give it a back and join it all together, and it sort of hides the jutty out bits of roof that are coming out in all directions as well, and hides anything that's a bit messy behind it, so multi-purpose really there. So not really a lot more to say on this building. We're really just finishing up the roofing parts here and seeing what we can do to cover up any sort of, like I say, messy bits. I do for some reason seem to remember that it took me absolutely ages to do that clock, so I think I've cut some bits of this time lapse out. Well, I know I've cut some bits out in the editing because we don't want to make the videos too long. I always sort of say that about this game. I have to do quite a lot of editing to get the time lapse down to about usually 20 minutes, but this one's half an hour, and I think that's fine because it's the first episode of the series, so yeah, starting off with a slightly longer episode is fine. in my opinion, but then they all might be this long, to be honest. It's when they start getting into the 40-minute to 50 to an hour that I think people lose their attention with these sort of time lapses. You know, it's not like we could really do much of a real-time section, but there will be some cinematics at the end as well, so that'll be something to enjoy once it's all complete. And yeah, it's funny, like, just how long it does take to just build one thing. And even though, you know, over time I have sort of sped up my builds a bit, they do still take me a lot of time to do. And here we can see the vintage car going in, the first one, just using the in-game one, which is absolutely fine, looks really nice. But I did want to make my own as well, and I sort of used a template, not a template, but sorry, like a reference image of a vintage car, and thought, what pieces can I use for this? And you can see me there looking at all different pieces. Obviously wanted something shiny to give that texture, but yeah, I couldn't think what, so I think I ended up going for like a temple piece or something. And yeah, to start with, I hate it and I think this looks ridiculous. I'm never going to make this into a nice car. But by the time I'm finished, I get something that I'm probably about 75% happy with. It's quite a difficult thing to make custom in the game, I think. And I do struggle with things like this. We've got lots of different pieces, but because nothing's resizable, I think that's where the issue lies. If things could just be resized, it'd make life a lot easier. And yeah, you could definitely make very different sort of custom objects if you could resize, but we can't, so there we go, wasting another TMTK piece there because I needed to use the hydro beams. They're just so much easier to work with, and really they're the only piece that's small enough to do this sort of trim of the windows of the car. So yeah, that's what we have to go with. I don't know what type of car this would be in real life. I don't understand, I don't know anything about, classic cars or anything like that. But yeah, it definitely gives that classic car look, and I'm not sure if it would be more an American car. Probably it would, I don't know. But I do sort of picture this area being more in England, but I'm not really sure. It could be either England or the USA. I guess Art Deco is more, well, like Art Deco and Roaring Twenties, you think more of American cities because some of the earlier sort of tall buildings and tower blocks. But yeah, I should really have researched more into the theme that I'm doing here, because I sound like a complete amateur, not really know what I'm talking about. But as always in Planet Coaster, I think as long as it looks good, then realism doesn't matter too much. And that's the other thing really, this is going to be much more of a fantasy build, this park. I'm not going for realism, I'm not going to bother too much with all the backstage areas and stuff like that, because it's just, I'm not that into building them. You know, if you like that, then there are tons of sort of Cedar Fair type builds on YouTube. But for me, I'm not very good at building coasters either. So for me, it's all about the theme and the building styles. And yeah, it's going to be a heavily themed park with a few probably quite poorly made roller coasters, but we'll see. We'll see what we can do. In the last one I was using the smoothing technique for all my coasters, and I probably won't do that again because it just takes too long, and I don't think it even makes them that much smoother anyway. You can just do by hand. But anyway, we move on to the final sort of buildings for this area, and these are the more low-key sort of basic shops. Nothing too crazy here at all, really. We're just using pillars and glass pieces and then covering them up at the back with just dark coloured temple pieces, just similar to what we've already built, similar colour scheme, similar textures, but just giving it a bit of variation and not making it quite as elaborate. I had to play about with this quite a bit to get the sort of heights that I wanted. Another thing I should probably mention is that the scale of this compared to the guests in game is completely off. Everything's far too big, but we're just gonna ignore that because the scale in this game's quite wrong anyway. With a lot of the pieces that they provide you with pieces that are huge, and I think people have always sort of struggled with that. Especially when going for realism, so we're just going to ignore that as well. And basically this is just me building whatever I want, really, and getting carried away with stuff, I think is going to be the sort of theme for this park. So we call this first building CJ Antiques, and yeah, no idea really where the name come from, just thought of random letters. And I'm not going to do shop fronts for these ones. I'm just going to get some Google images and stick them in billboards so that it gives a bit of a black backdrop, and it looks like there's a shop in there, but when you zoom in closer you can tell it's not, but I don't think that matters. Wanted some custom windows as well on the top floors of this building, so just using some brick pieces and rotating them, and yeah, it's, again, nothing too crazy, just looks like I had 2 attempts at doing this actually, and use this piece secondly. It sticks out a long way at the back, but that doesn't matter because it's all covered up and we won't be able to see it anyway. And yes, I mean, most of these buildings will not have any interiors that you can go in, but there is one of them I do put a small interior in, which you'll see in a bit, which is very, very basic. And it's basically just so that we can have a shop in there, so that it serves a purpose and doesn't look scrappy inside. You'll see that go in a bit, but again, I don't want to waste too much piece count on interiors unless it's going to be for a ride or a queue or something like that, or obviously a coaster station. But yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty much all for me to say in this time lapse. So I'm going to let you enjoy the rest of it without me rambling on too much, and enjoy the cinematics at the end, and I'll see you all in the next build, which hopefully won't be too far away. Thank you very much for watching then. Bye bye.